All right, let's continue and see if Martin is going to make it. It's August 12th, 2003, and this is Caitlin. FedEx claimed that that its 48-hour guarantee did not apply to Africa. My mother was livid. When I left for the pizza parlor at noon on August 12th, she was on the phone screaming at them. And when I got back later at night, she was pleading with the consolidator whom she'd bought the ticket from. "We already paid for it," she said. "Can't they reissue one at the airport?" I couldn't hear the response, but I knew it wasn't good when my mother shouted, "Thank you for nothing," and slammed down the phone. My father arrived moments later. "How is it going?" he asked. "Horribly," she said. Her voice was scratchy. "I'm at my wit's end. I already called Villanova to say he might not get here in time." "What did they ask? Or what did they say?" I asked, alarmed that it had come to this. "That they would hold his spot until January," my mother said. "But Martin can't wait that long. He needs to come now." "Let me make a few calls," my dad said. We ate dinner first, and then my father took over the phone, starting with the consolidator and then working the airlines and FedEx. At 1 a.m. he was still on the phone. It was 7 a.m. in Vic Falls. My mother thought we should call Martin to tell him the news. "What news?" I said, exasperated. "There is no news." "Tell him to go to the airport," my father said. "He's getting on that plane." August 14th, 2003. My flight was scheduled to leave in 3 hours when the phone rang. Tekla jumped to get it. She then handed the receiver to me. It was Anne. "Mom," I said, relieved. "Am I coming?" "We're still working on it," she said. I could tell she'd been crying, and that started my own tears. I was so stupid to believe that these voodoo rituals might work, and angry that I allowed myself to think that they would. The tears were now stinging the back of my eyes. I handed the phone to Tekla and ran up to my room. I couldn't cry in front of Wallace's parents. It was too undignified. As soon as I was able to shut the bedroom door, I fell into my bed and buried my head beneath the pillow. The sounds that came from my belly were as primal and terrifying as the prophets. They hurt my throat as they clawed their way up and out. 10 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I wiped my face dry before opening it. Fanuel and Tekla were there. "Get your things. We're taking you to the airport," they said. "How come?" I asked, confused. "We're not sure how, but you're getting on that plane," Fanuel said. I grabbed the few things I was taking: my money belt with all my paperwork, a toothbrush, and one of the very first photos of Caitlin, in which she is wearing her mother's sun hat. I placed that picture with my passport in the money belt and followed Tekla and Fanuel downstairs into the car. They had already packed a suitcase of African art for me to bring to Anne, who would send it to another friend in the U.S. to sell to raise funds for Wallace. Wallace's father drove so fast I thought we might actually crash. We now had less than an hour before my flight left. We pulled into the airport and went to the British Airways desk to explain the situation. The attendant pointed us towards the manager's office down the corridor. The manager was on the phone when we arrived. Fanuel knocked on her window. We knew this was rude, but the flight was boarding. There wasn't time for manners. She looked up from her desk and waved us in. "Martin Gonda?" she said. "Yes," I answered, stunned. "I'm talking to a man who claims he's your American father," she said. The hex had been lifted. 5 minutes later, I walked outside onto the tarmac with a ticket in my hand. I was the last person to board the small jet to Johannesburg. I took my seat by the window and waved to Tekla and Fanuel, who waited to make sure I got on that plane. "Welcome to British Airways Flight 429, the stewardess announced as the propellers outside started to whir. "Please prepare for takeoff." I had never been on a plane before and had no idea what that meant, so I looked around at the other passengers. There were only 30 or so people on board, most of them white men in business suits. A few were likely tourists, I guessed, based on their khaki pants and matching shirts. There was one other black guy and a few years older than me. Copying the others, I snapped my seatbelt on and tugged it extra tight. As the plane began to move, I held onto the armrest with both hands, my knuckles straining through my skin. When the nose of the plane tilted up, I thought I might throw up the meal I had eaten at Tekla and Fanuel's house earlier that morning. I closed my eyes and prayed. I opened them when the stewardess announced that it was fine to walk around. All these people snapped off their seatbelts and got up to get books and stretch and use the restroom. I looked out the window and saw clouds and blue skies forever. I closed my eyes again and did not open them until we had landed safely in Johannesburg. The airport was the busiest place I'd ever seen. All these people, many talking with funny accents or languages I had never heard before. There were signs with lists of flight numbers followed by the names of exotic places that they were heading to. Tekla had given me $10 to get snacks. I saw McDonald's and got very excited. Some of the wealthier kids from Marius Brothers had bragged about it. So I walked up to the counter and bought my very first hamburger. It cost $8, but I did not care. It was delicious. I went and searched for my next flight, but did not know how to find it. My ticket had so many numbers on it, but I was not sure which one corresponded with the flipping and flashing board. So when I saw the one black guy from my Victoria Falls flight walk by, I asked him for help. As it turned out, he was heading to Paris as well, where his father was a diplomat. We walked to the gate together and then waited for the flight to board. When he had to use the bathroom, I followed him. I didn't want to get lost. That was a huge plane. I watched movies, ate food served on fancy trays, and wished I could keep the cozy blanket and pillow they offered all the passengers. We arrived in Paris, and once again, I didn't want to take any chances. This time, I asked the attendant to bring me to the next gate. My flight was not for a few hours, but did not matter. I wasn't going to risk it. I just stayed there, not moving. Once the flight began to board, I was the first person in line. The next stop was Philadelphia. Caitlin, August 15th, 2003. I didn't wake up that morning because I never went to sleep. I stayed awake all night tracking each of Martin's flights online. The day before, we made a poster that said, "Welcome to America, Martin," with bubble letters, which I colored in with red magic markers. I laid that in the trunk of my mom's car that morning and then climbed into the back seat. My grandparents, Nan and Pop, drove their own car, so I had the entire seat to myself. I didn't invite Damon to come along. I'd been waiting for this moment for 6 years, which was 3 times as long as I had known Damon. This meant too much to me to share with anyone but my family. Damon was mad, but I didn't care. We arrived an hour early and camped out as close as we could to the international flight exit as possible, right next to the swinging doors that led down the long hallway to customs. Every time a new wave of people arrived, I would pick up my poster. "Who's Martin?" an elderly man asked my mom. "Our African son," my mom answered, beaming. He looked utterly confused, but we didn't care. We had already told everyone on our street that Martin was coming. We were hosting a welcome to the neighborhood barbecue the following day. That evening, our closest relatives were coming to finally meet Martin. Everyone was excited, but no one more than I. We'd been there for an hour when Paris flight passengers started coming through. We knew because I kept asking, "What flight were you on?" I started counting people. When I hit 120, I got nervous. "What if he got stuck in France?" I asked my mom. "He's here," she said. "I can feel it." We kept peering down the hallway until it was just a trickle, and then no one. My stomach did a somersault. Something must be wrong. I was just about to go find an airline representative to make sure he had gotten on the flight when I saw a young black man emerge. As he got closer, his face erupted into the biggest smile ever. "That's him!" I cried. I was standing on one side of the plastic barrier that corralled the arriving passengers in one direction. He didn't even get to walk around it. I just reached over and grabbed him. We stood there hugging right over the fence. "You made it," I said. "I did," Martin answered. The crowd of people around us waiting for their loved ones burst into applause as my mother rushed up and started snapping photos. Martin pulled back and said, "Hi, Mom." My mom burst into tears. "We're so glad you're here." My dad was crying too, as he held out his hand to shake Martin's. "Welcome home, son." Martin grabbed his hand and pulled him close. My grandfather was videotaping the whole thing, but that did not stop Martin from saying, "Hi, Nan. Hi, Pop." He knew who everybody was. "Is that your only bag?" Pop asked, pointing to the suitcase full of African art. "This is for Wallace," Martin explained. "I told him just to come with his clothes on his back and we'd take care of the rest," my mom said. "I have this," Martin said, pulling a toothbrush out of his back pocket. We all laughed. On our way home, we took a slight detour to drive by Villanova. The stone buildings looked majestic against the green carpet-like lawn. That's where you're headed, Martin, Mom said. August 15th, 2003, Martin. Hearing Caitlin say, "You made it," when we first embraced made me realize this was real. For so many years I thought I had conjured her, but here she was, as beautiful as I imagined, but much taller. She towered over me. No longer the 12-year-old girl with jewelry on her teeth that I first met 6 years ago. I wouldn't wake up in Chigadora or Chisamba Singles or Victoria Falls in a sweat. I had made it. As I was telling her all about my adventures, I saw that the girl who had become my best friend in her letters was the woman sitting right next to me in the car. I still couldn't believe it, but I felt immediately at ease with her. Anne and Rich were asking questions from the front seat, smiling, so loving as well. She got this demeanor from both parents, I thought. They drove me to Villanova's campus, and it took my breath away. It was difficult to imagine that I would be walking across the campus as an American student in less than 2 weeks. I could barely believe I was sitting there in the back of a 4x4 Jeep next to Caitlin. We pulled into their driveway, which I immediately recognized from the photos Caitlin had sent me. Richie came out to embrace me. "My African brother," Richie said. "Very cool to meet you." Caitlin took me inside and showed me around. They had set up a room for me in the basement, where my dear friend Wallace had spent many nights. We called him after I showered. He was still in Colorado finishing his summer there. I would see him in a week or so. Then Caitlin said, "Let's go." She wanted to take me shopping at the legendary mall to get some things for my new American life. Walking into the glimmering palace with its magic sliding glass doors and gusts of cool air was everything I had imagined and more. The smells of sweet cinnamon and fried food overwhelmed me as we walked through what Caitlin called the food court. We shared something called a Cinnabon, and to this day I had never eaten anything that delicious. Then she took me shopping. That I found overwhelming. To start, her father gave her his credit card. This was a new concept, that a small piece of plastic could purchase so many things. Caitlin bought me pants and shorts, t-shirts and long-sleeve shirts, flip-flops, sunglasses, and more. I kept saying it wasn't necessary, but soon just gave up. When she picked out not one, but 3 belts, I had to say something. "I only have one waist," I said. I've never witnessed such excess, not even at Marius Brothers. Eventually, I just went along with it, like I was in a dream, or an American movie, like the ones I'd watched sitting on my brother's shoulders and peering through a window all those years before in Chisamba Singles. Back home, Caitlin insisted I put on a new outfit for dinner, my first with my American family. When I came downstairs in my chinos and button-down shirt, everyone erupted in applause. The feeling reminded me of my first day, slipping into my uniform at Marius Brothers. But this was even bigger. I was dressed now as an American student. My dream had been realized. I sat down at the table, which my American mother had covered in food, a meat dish called pot roast with potatoes and carrots that made my mouth water with its rich smell. The bowl of salad was so large I could wrap both my arms around it, and there was a small spinning device next to it with an assortment of bottles that Caitlin called dressing. I'd never heard of that word, nor was I the slightest bit hungry. I was still full from the Cinnabon and too ecstatic to eat, but I helped myself to a bit of everything. I wanted to taste it all. Each bite was further proof that this was real. I was in Hatfield with my American family, wearing my new clothes, and about to go to university. Okay, so we're almost done. But isn't it so great? I just love this book, and I'm so happy that he is here. Okay, but yeah, I only have one more reading, and then we'll be done. I hope you enjoy this book as much as I do. Okay.